how we define negotiation. It's essentially an influence skill. What matters to the person you're negotiating with? What are their interests? What are their concerns? What are their fears? What are their values? You should also prepare what your own interests are. Think about what you really need to achieve, not just your first offer, but what's important for you in the long run. What are the goals you're trying to achieve? I need to be as better prepared than anyone possibly could be. Confidence and preparation can go a long ways. If I go into a negotiation and I don't know what will happen, or if I'm very, very afraid of walking away, I've often lost leverage and I'm often not confident.
Hello everyone, my name is Natalia Oboznenko. I'm an academic director of the Business School of the Ukrainian Catholic University, and today we have a pleasure of having conversation with Linda Netsch. Linda is an expert in negotiations and leadership development, and she's an instructor of Harvard Law School and the founder of Align Consulting. And we are happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us, Linda. And let's dive right in.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start with, what event, because we discussed it previously.
Right.
And actually, after this infamous conversation or workshop in the Oval Office, can we say that the old style negotiation are dead, and we are living now in the era of the new art of the deal?
I don't think that any style is dead. I think that just one of the most powerful people in the world has a very confrontational style of negotiation, very much based on power. And it's frankly easier to negotiate when you have more power, more leverage, more control, more money. So that style can work well, the confrontational style, the focus on power, when you have it. But that doesn't mean most of us have all that much power, so many resources, so much control. And there's another style of negotiation, which is more focused on collaboration and relationships and exerting power through dialogue, through finding out what is important to both sides and problem solving to find a solution. And I think that style is alive and well. It's just not in the news as much, and it's not a style that is being used by some of the most powerful people in the world.
Well, thank you. For those who didn't attend your course, maybe you can share your golden rules of collaborative negotiation. What to do, what not to do.
Sure. And I'll just give a quick summary of those things. And we talked about different styles of negotiation, and the one that I am a firm believer in is this notion of more collaborative negotiation. The term win-win might be overused, but it's the idea that can the negotiators find ways to satisfy both of their interests, to do deals that capture more value in the deal, that are based on norms or standards, ways that people perceive as fair. And so that's the focus of the way I think about negotiation. And in terms of golden rules, so first, preparation. I think it's very important to be prepared for a negotiation, and it doesn't have to take too much time as long as you have a systematic way to do it. And it's thinking about what matters to the person you're negotiating with. What are their interests? What are their concerns? What are their fears? What are their values? The more you understand how they see things, the better chance you have of influencing them. You should also prepare what your own interests are and think about what you really need to achieve, not just your first offer, but what's important for you in the long run, or the goals you're trying to achieve. And also thinking about walking away. What is going to happen if you can't get a deal? What are you going to do? What do we think they are going to do? Those are some basic preparation tools that can be very helpful if you just spend a little bit of time thinking about that. And also thinking about what resources do you have that the other person is interested in? What do they have that you're interested in? Those are doing that kind of analysis helps you think about ways to put together deals that are better for both sides. And I think there's a big difference between negotiations where it's mostly win-lose. That if you're good at that, if you have a lot of power, you can often do well. It often does come at a cost to relationships. So over the long run, if you lose some of that power, that control, you've often also burned some bridges with allies or other people you've negotiated with, and that can be dangerous in the long run.
I understand that preparation is a key, yes. But what about good intentions and empathy? What is the balance between good intention and empathy and like prepared in advance tactics?
Well, I think about tactics as, very kind of short term, whereas I think I think about strategy and I think about long term when I think about preparing for a negotiation. So I think preparation is key, but in the course of negotiation, you mentioned empathy, and I think too many times people confuse that with sympathy. I think of empathy as the ability to understand someone better, which often means very good listening skills. I'm a huge believer in listening skills and active listening, if you will. That is having a dialogue where you get to understand better the perspective and interests and motivations of the people you're negotiating with. And you can that helps you actually think through ways of doing deals that are more likely to get a yes from the other side. So I don't think it's about preparing tricks or tactics. I mean, those can be fun and sometimes useful, but it doesn't help you be a good strategic negotiator or to think about long-term relationships and about making sure you get deals that last over time.
Well, a little bit, of personal question or information. When did you understand that you need to study negotiation tools and to teach negotiation? Is it mandatory in law school for lawyers, or it was personal interest?
It certainly wasn't mandatory in law school when I went to law school. I think I realized the importance of actually learning about negotiation when I started law school. So prior to law school, I'd been an active duty military officer. I was in the Air Force, stationed at Ramstein, and my job was helping to put together a mobile satellite communication system for passing intelligence information to NATO allies. And at that time, I was very young. I was right out of school. I had no real experience in formal negotiation training, just the kind of negotiation training we all have, which is we grow up with it and we see it in our relationships and we see it on television. And that isn't necessarily the best way to learn. And I was negotiating with NATO allies and defense contractors and my boss and my colleagues, but I didn't even think about it as negotiation. I was just doing it as part of my job. So when I went back to law school, there was a course offered in negotiation. And one of the teachers was the author of the book Getting to Yes, Roger Fisher, who was instrumental in really saying this thing can be taught. This is a skill. Negotiation's a skill. Like other skills, it can be taught. It can be improved over your lifetime. You never stop learning how to improve your negotiations. So I think that's when I realized the importance of having a structured way to think about negotiation. I took that class my first year of law school. I honestly didn't think it was, I thought it was actually common sense. And then as you go through life, you realize maybe it's common sense, but it isn't necessarily common practice. So I've spent a lot of my professional career thinking through how to improve, thinking through how other people can improve. But I'd say that first year of law school, when I took a class that focused on the kind of negotiation I talked about earlier, that was really foundational in my path toward negotiation training and consulting.
Interesting. Maybe we can switch to women topic because you assisted like 2 days ago. You participated at the breakfast, the business breakfast she leads, and a lot of women, many women were there, business women and alumni of the business school and top management of the university. And actually, what do you think about challenges of Ukrainian women during the war, and maybe other challenges in peaceful but anyway difficult life in the US, in Europe? There is a difference.
Yeah, I think I certainly can't possibly understand all the challenges that it is to be a woman in Ukraine right now. But I think there are stereotypes about genders, and there's stereotypes about women, there's stereotypes about men. Sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're very wrong. And so I think I'm not naive. I know that sometimes there are structural barriers for women. For example, when I first joined the Air Force, women were not allowed to be fighter pilots. That was just something I had to accept, but also could work to change. And over the course of years, many people to work to change hearts and minds about women in combat positions, including fighter pilots. There's backlash against that right now. But I think, there can be structural barriers against people who don't have power. Sometimes that's women. I personally find it more helpful to think about people whose styles are more confrontational and zero-sum versus people who are more collaborative. Because I certainly know women that are very collaborative and great listeners and easier to negotiate with because of that style. But I know women who can be as difficult and confrontational as some of the more powerful people that were frequently in the news these days. So for me, I think through best skills. For me personally, I think about, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, I need to be as better prepared than anyone possibly could be. I have to know what I'm talking about. I have to be clear about my own interests, but also good at the skills that I think come more naturally to me, like listening skills. I think in negotiations, there's opportunities to listen and to collaborate, and then opportunities to be assertive and protect your own interest. And whichever is your strong suit, the stereotype would be women are better listeners, not so good at assertiveness. If that's true for you as a woman, then you should work on your assertiveness skills. I think we also probably know men who are very good at empathy, but not so good at assertiveness. They also could work on their assertiveness skills. I think it's just being self-aware. And then if you're prepared, if you know what you're talking about, and you show people respect, which is often what the listening piece does, makes people feel respected, I think you can be successful even in environments where you're not necessarily the dominant type of person in that environment.
Then I heard some companies proposing course on women negotiation skills. Do you believe that there are any difference of the approaches to negotiate, to communicate?
Again, in generalities, in stereotypes, I would say that the stereotype, again, would be women more focusing on listening and on relationships and on emotions.
Ready for compromise.
And compromise. But then again, I don't think that necessarily applies to all men or all women. So I think while it's helpful to know the difference and it's interesting, there are studies that are done comparing genders. For me personally, I find it more useful to think about what are the skills that are effective in any negotiation, whether I'm with someone who's dominant or someone who's more collaborative, when I'm with men or women. I think for me, it's preparation and it's self-confidence, which often comes from preparation. If I know that I know what I'm talking about and I know what skills I have and I've worked on the things that aren't my natural skills, then I have more confidence in the negotiation. And regardless of one's gender, that confidence and preparation can go a long ways. It also builds respect for people who might judge you because of your gender, or because of your age, for whatever reason, where people are put into categories. If you behave in a way that shows confidence and preparation and skill, it tends to change minds.
But you teach also for different audiences, and there are students, lawyers, business owners, and how do you adjust your course and your theory and practice and your material to the different audiences?
I certainly, if I'm in a culture that's not my own, I think the most important thing is to be aware it's not your culture, and you should try to learn as much as you can and be respectful of that culture. But honestly, the material that I teach can apply in any culture. It's just that there might be different norms. The norms in Ukraine might be different than the norms in Germany, than the norms in the United States or in Asia. But familiarity with what the norms are and adapting to be respectful of those norms helps you in whichever culture or environment you're in. But the skills are still the same. It is understand the interests of the people you're negotiating with, understand what those norms are in the context, or even what the market norms are if you're doing commercial negotiations. Respect differences in communication style, work on clarity. It's where those active listening skills are particularly important when communication is harder because of language differences. So the fundamental principles are the same. It's just you apply them in the different context of the group that you're working with. And I have honestly worked all over the world, from the Middle East to Asia, to Eastern Europe, to Western Europe, to South America. There's certainly cultural difference, some stylistic difference, but there's, at the end of the day, there are people who have interests and motivations. And they want to get things done, and that's what negotiation is.
You said that your last experience of teaching our students of different ages was quite, different, and surprising. And you said the result of younger generation, younger communicator, and more mature participant of the course were different.
Yeah, different in ways that maybe are kind of obvious, in that the more mature, the more experienced professionals just have a lot of experience in negotiation, good and bad. And so it's fun to work with smart, experienced people like that who can bring their own stories and their own perspective. And they see the value of the material because they've lived it, and they've seen the mistakes and they've seen the successes. So you can have really interesting conversations, even just talking about some of the professional experiences of a more experienced negotiation group. And on the other hand, younger participants often are very curious. They want a lot of feedback. They want to improve their skills, so they're eager to improve their skills. They're both fun groups to work with for different reasons.
And what do you say about the impact of AI and all evolving technologies, remote work? How did it impact the style of communication, the style of negotiation? Is it the same how to negotiate in Zoom?
Yeah, well, I think Zoom, at least, so I'll start with the Zoom piece and then move back to AI. At least the one good thing about us learning to get so comfortable with Zoom because of COVID was at least it allows us to have face-to-face. Mind you, it's over a screen, but at least you get to read eye contact and body language and things like that. Whereas if you're just on a audio, just phone, or even harder, just in printed text, digital, you can't get all those cues and things you read into a conversation with someone where you can actually see their face and their reactions. So in a way, I think Zoom made it easier for us to have those more rich face-to-face, so to speak, conversations than just on text or audio. With respect to AI, so I personally like AI for things like a quick summary, for things like kind of generating ideas, maybe an outline. My worry about AI is it'll make us lazy. Like, instead of reading that book, I'll just have it summarized. Instead of thinking through how I could come up with an idea for an article, I'll just throw some words into ChatGPT and see what it gives me. So I think it's a very useful tool, certainly for automating a lot of jobs that none of us want to do, spend our brain power doing. AI is great. And for like giving us some initial spark. Again, a rough draft. There's a lot of stories in the US of, lawyers have to be particularly careful with AI because you can get wrong answers. I've seen those hallucinations and those wrong answers way too often in ChatGPT, in whatever AI model you're using. So I think you have to be very cautious. But in terms of getting you a quick summary, getting you an outline, maybe sparking ideas, I think there's a lot of power in AI to help us with that.
You represent Harvard Law School and Harvard School of Negotiation. What is so unique about this approach?
Yeah, although I don't necessarily represent them, but I am a product of Harvard Law School and the Harvard Negotiation Project. And And what's so special about them? Well, I think it's because of Roger Fisher, the guy who wrote Getting to Yes, is that he was at a very powerful institution, and he believed that you could actually teach people to become better negotiators. And actually back in the early 80s, or approximately that time when the book came out, that was novel. You'd asked before, is it mandatory? Well, I believe, I'm not sure of this, but I believe that Harvard does have a mandatory negotiation course now that's relatively new. It was not mandatory, but one thing I know from the time I started law school till now, in the United States at least, negotiation courses are at almost every law school, almost every business school, and even some undergraduate programs. So the idea that you can teach people to become more effective is something that has certainly grown significantly over my lifetime.
But they're using the same methodology of Roger Fisher of Harvard Project, or they're...
Everybody, there's certainly a lot of different ideas on how to be most effective, but some of those core ideas that were captured in Getting to Yes around understanding the interests of both sides, understanding the walkaway of both sides, understanding market norms, criteria, legitimate standards, those things were all captured succinctly in that book and are really worked on as core principles in the negotiation project. That doesn't mean that everybody you encounter in your life is an easy collaborative negotiator. They're not, but you still have the same tools. Whether I'm negotiating with someone who feels hostile or not, they still have motivations that I better understand if I want to influence them. So there are a lot of different models, there are a lot of different tools, a lot of different books out there. I think the most important thing is develop an awareness of what works for you and why, and constantly work on improving, constantly get feedback from other people, because that helps you, just like any skill. The more you practice it, the more you reflect on it, the more you get feedback from it, the better you will get at that skill.
Do you have some story or example when negotiation skills helped you to overcome some difficult situation or force majeure situation?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think negotiation skills help me every day. If you think about how we define negotiation, it's essentially an influence skill. It's back and forth communication where you're trying to reach an agreement that satisfies the interests of the parties. So we're doing it constantly. And I think it helps in things like, I can certainly think it has helped me in professional negotiations I've had when I took on new clients or took new jobs, when I had a sense of how to be most effective in advocating for myself, but also preserve the relationship, because obviously that's important in those contexts. I've also had negotiations where, because I'm comfortable walking away when I know I'm walking to something better than if I stay at the table or take the deal that's been offered, I think I've been given the confidence to know when is the right time to walk away and the right way to walk away, such that you're not necessarily closing a door or destroying a relationship, but instead standing up for yourself, but in a way that doesn't burn bridges.
Our students are quoting a lot Banta, and can you share with us and with our audience what does it mean?
Yeah, negotiation people love jargon and special terms, but so the concept of BATNA came from Getting to Yes. I believe that was one of the first times the term was used. Maybe before, not sure. But essentially it stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. That's BATNA. And but we're all familiar with this concept because it's your walkaway. It's what you're going to do if you can't get a deal. So if we're not able to reach resolution at the table, we have to think about what our BATNA is. What am I going to do if I can't get agreement with the people I'm negotiating with? And it's a surprisingly helpful concept in preparation. If I go into a negotiation and I don't know what will happen, or if I'm very, very afraid of walking away, I've often lost leverage and I'm often not confident. But at least if I prepared what my walkaway will be, I'm more confident in that negotiation. I also should think about what the other person's walkaway is. Like, do they have something better that they can do that doesn't require my participation? because that can give them more leverage in the negotiation as well. So the concept of BATNA is essentially just your walkaway. It's your backup plan.
And what do you advise for young people, for young businessmen, where to start the art of, to master the art of negotiation?
Yeah, I think it is a good idea to read some of the many great books on negotiation that are out there. I do recommend getting to Yes. It helped me in the beginning. It's still a very, very popular book because it's so clear and it has some very fundamental principles that we can all understand. But for younger people, I think it is read the books, take a class, and constantly get feedback. I think particularly when negotiations go wrong, we want to forget about them because it's a bad result, but we often learn a lot from those mistakes. I certainly have. So it's getting used to really analyzing negotiations, whether they go well or not, and getting feedback to constantly improve. Again, think of it as a skill, and whether you're playing tennis or negotiating, you can get better with coaching and with feedback and with experience. So those are all things that particularly younger folks can benefit from.
I'm going to thank you for this great conversation. It has been great as the previous time we had the chat. And I think our audience will take a lot of useful tips and strategies for good negotiation. And thank you very much for that. And we are looking forward to see you again.
Thank you very much. I always appreciate the opportunity to come to UCU and work with your great group of people. So thank you.
Thank you.